Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian, and one of the machine guns, or shotguns, or shotgun machine guns that you may have seen in a number of video games, but not very often in real life, is the USAS-12, the Universal Sporting Automatic Shotgun. This was actually a development from Atchison, Maxwell Atchison, who is in some circles better known for his AA-12 automatic shotgun. This was the follow-up to the AA-12, and these actually went into production. So this was developed in the late 80s, using apparently some of the ideas from the final versions of the AA-12. It was taken up by a group called the Gilbert Equipment Company here in the US. They wanted to market it. They needed someone to manufacture it, though. So they put out some feelers looking for companies with manufacturing capability that would be interested, and the one that ended up coming through was the Daewoo Precision Equipment Company, or Daewoo Precision Industries, which is part of the massive South Korean Daewoo conglomerate. Now, when it comes to Daewoo, you're probably more familiar with their rifles. They had the K1A1 and the K2 rifles, which were sold here in the US before 1989. They're interesting guns. They're kind of hybrid AR/AK rifles, and really nice, actually. They're cool guns. But anyway, Daewoo put these guns into production in full auto, 12 gauge. They use 10-round box magazines or 20-round drums, 2 3/4 inch 12 gauge shells, and they apparently have a rate of fire of 400 to 450 rounds per minute. So relatively fast for a 12 gauge. You'd empty that 10-round magazine pretty quickly. In total, about 30,000 of these things were made, although the vast majority of them were sold in Asia for police and military use. In the US, obviously they are machine guns, and they were made post-1986, so that really limited the potential for commercial sale of them. There were a couple different companies that, over a couple of years, tried to import these as semi-auto weapons, and they were declared destructive devices by the Treasury. The reason that happens is because they have a bore over 50 caliber. If the Treasury Department decides that they don't have a sporting purpose, then they are by default destructive devices. So there are 3 shotguns in particular that had that happen: the Street Sweeper, the Striker 12, and the USAS-12 here. Now this one is papered and is full auto, so I don't have a chance to shoot it today, unfortunately, but I am going to take it apart so we can check out the inside and see how it works. All right, couple controls here, not a whole lot going on. Our magazine release is this button. This is structurally very similar to something like a Saiga mag, although it predates it by a little while. 10 rounds. They also had 20-round drums. Now, it is interesting that these guns are almost completely ambidextrous. You'll see there's a dust cover here, and there's a charging handle slot in the handguard. While the charging handle is over here, it can be pulled out and reversed if you'd like to. And we also have a matching dust cover on this side. One of these is always permanently shut, and the other opens automatically when you fire. But again, you can swap those around so you can have the gun eject whichever side you like. Now, safety selector is down here. This particular gun is actually one of the semi-auto imports. The guys where I'm using this are a manufacturer, so they have converted this to full auto. Normally it would be fire, semi-auto, and full auto. Now, one other interesting, cool little thing, charging handle is here, and you can push the charging handle in to lock the bolt open. It does not lock open automatically, so if you want it open, push the charging handle in to do that. All right, there's our open dust cover, by the way. So I'm going to go ahead and take our handguards off, and then we can pull the action apart and see exactly how it works. All right, handguards are off. You can see our charging handle right here, and it has a lug that is reversible. What you would do is pull a little connecting pin out, pull the charging handle, flip it over if that's what you want to do. This spring up here is just to reciprocate the charging handle. The main spring is over inside the length of the gun. So next step, and really the only step for proper field stripping, is to remove this end cap. Now, I have to hold the butt of the gun in, because once the main end cap is off, our recoil spring comes loose, And then, let's angle the gun this way. And the recoil spring and guide rod come out the back. This is a very, very long assembly that runs literally from the end of the buttstock all the way up to the front sight. Then we have our receiver assembly. We have our barrel assembly. And then before I can take the gas piston and the bolt out, I have to also pop off the lower. There are 2 sets of screws here. All right. Our lower assembly comes off, and then our bolt comes out the back, and we're left with just a bare stripped receiver. All right, let's take a closer look at how all of these parts work together. All right, this is a long stroke gas piston gun. So this is our piston head, and the most important thing about it is the locking mechanism. The bolt simply rides back and forth. That roller prevents it from locking when it's not supposed to. And then this plug lifts up when the bolt is in battery, and that's actually what locks it. We think about the 12 gauge as being this massively powerful weapon, and a full auto 12 gauge is, but the pressure exerted by a 12 gauge cartridge on firing is actually relatively slim. So this locks into this hole in the top of the barrel, and that's all that's necessary to keep the gun safely locked. It's kind of interesting, that is almost identical in practical terms to the high standard 10B, how it locks. Now we have, let's see, our firing pin is captive in here. The rest of this actually comes apart very easily. So what I can do is push the firing pin in, and we have a little keeper pin right there. If I punch that out, then the firing pin and firing pin spring come out. I can then drop these two, which lock the bolt. These two guys lock the bolt onto the bolt carrier. Bolt comes out, and the locking piece comes out. So the locking piece is actually running on this extension in the middle of the bolt. It sits like this. When the bolt travels, it does that to lock. When the carrier goes back, it pulls this down and unlocks. There isn't actually very much at all going on in the receiver. It's mostly just a component carrier for everything else. You will notice that on the active dust cover, we have this little spring detent, so it locks shut. On the other one, we have this permanently locked in place tab. So if you want to replace which side it ejects from, what you have to do is actually pull the main pin that holds these in place, pull both of them, and swap them. Not difficult, really. But, we do have an early M16 style rear sight. It does have an aperture rear sight, and then there is a post on the barrel assembly that we'll take a look at. So that's it, carry handle and receiver. Now the barrel assembly. The barrel is simple. It's a 12 gauge smoothbore barrel, obviously. There's our front sight. The sight picture is basically identical to that of the Daewoo rifles. This guy is our gas tube, which comes out and releases that spring at the same time. This does really nothing except contain the gas piston, keep it in place. And then we have our charging handle. Again, this is the locking recess in the barrel. Not much else going on there. Here's our gas block. Of course, has a gas port in the bottom in here. Lastly, we have our stock assembly, which has the main recoil spring right here, which runs all the way into the stock, so you can't have a folding stock on these guns, the way they're built. Cap, and then you can see the guide rod is extremely long. This guide rod is literally the entire length of the gun. This actually runs right through the center of the gas piston. It's a little finicky to line up. Let's see if I can get it here. So our gas piston is riding right on top of and around the main recoil spring guide. That's actually also a really clever idea. It keeps everything in the gun lined up, and it means that, for example, on an AK long piston like this, you have to have a pin here and allow the front of the gas piston to wobble a little bit to ensure that it's always lined up properly. Well, they can avoid that because this has this solid metal guide rod running throughout the entire gun. Keeps everything in line nicely. All right, last major internal component here is our lower, which is just a housing for the trigger group, basically. We do have this spring-loaded ejector, and then hammer. Very similar to the Daewoo K2 hammer assemblies. There's your magazine release. Pistol grip is also straight off the Daewoo K2. All in all, the USAS is actually a pretty clever design. Apparently, they're pretty decent shooters. The rate of fire is a little high, but the weight of the gun helps control the recoil. They do have this nice inline design to prevent the gun from rising too crazily. And yeah, overall, pretty clever design, pretty effective. If it weren't for the National Firearms Act, and these things being both machine guns and or destructive devices, depending on the version, they would definitely be popular guns here. I think they work quite well. It really says something that a company like Daewoo, which is not a small potatoes kind of company, was willing to put these into serious large-scale production. 30,000 produced of a full auto combat shotgun is no trivial matter. Most guns like this don't get any production at all. So, pretty cool. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I would like to give a big thanks to Movie Gun Supply for letting me take a look at this, their shop USAS-12. And hope you guys enjoyed the video. Tune back into Forgotten Weapons for more exotic full auto shotguns.